Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. It was fun to see Russian ambassador to the U.S., Anatoly Antonov, on the Sunday talk shows, Face the Nation in particular, because I hadn't seen a routine like that since the heydays of Yakov Smirnoff. And I don't get to Branson, Missouri very much anymore.
Right. Okay.
So I don't get to see Yakov do his, in America, you watch TV. In Soviet Russia, TV watch you type of humor, which I do like. Anatoly Anatonov would give you a version of that, which is essentially, we're not going to invade Ukraine. U.S., NATO trying to invade us. This is his response to the security concerns the Ukrainians and the West reportedly have.
There is no innovation, and there is no such plans. It was fixed in Russian documents that we conveyed to our American friends in the State Department. Russia has publicly declared its readiness to continue the diplomatic efforts to resolve all outstanding issues.
Yeah, we even got Emmanuel Macron to try to set up a little sit down with Putin and Biden, another one.
And there might be a summit with Biden and Putin, possibly. Only if
Putin
agrees, right?
Yeah. And so it all comes down to the definition of Russian territory. That's what Antonov says.
We have our legitimate right to have our troops where we want on Russian territory. And I would like to say you that we are not threatening to anybody. We are not threatening to United States. We are not threatening to Ukraine. It's very easy to solve this crisis if you persuade Kyiv to sit at the table of negotiations with Lugansk and Donbas people. So there will be no fighting, there will be peace, there will be any casualties. It's so easy. But as to us, as to Russian Federation, we have a grave concern regarding activities of North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Mm-hmm. And I would like to say you that forces of this bloc have come to Russian boundary.
This guy would be great if they do a remake of Death of Stalin. It's just central casting.
Yes.
For more on this, pleased to be joined by Bill Gertz, who's the national security correspondent, that is, for the Washington Times. He's also the author of Deceiving the Sky, Inside Communist China's Drive for Global Supremacy. Bill, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. So can you decode what Ambassador Antonov is trying to offer to the American audience?
Yeah, I think it's part of a strategic deception on the part of Moscow. What we're seeing on the ground, U.S. intelligence is saying that things are heading in the direction of an invasion. I mean, the reports in Washington here is that commanders have been given orders to go ahead with the invasion. It hasn't happened yet. Until it does, we can't be sure if it's not some type of also strategic deception. Also, on the diplomatic front, the White House was kind of holding out the hope for some type of meeting between Biden and Putin, and now the latest is the Kremlin is throwing cold water on that, saying that a meeting is premature.
Well, so with respect to what Antonov said about, Kiev coming to the table, the Ukraine is irrelevant here. This is Ukraine as a chess piece between Russia and NATO and America. I mean, that's who because Ukraine is not in a position to give Russia anything it wants other than to just sort of cede the Donbas region to Russia, which it's not going to do formally. So this is really what the West is willing to do vis-a-vis Russia, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of an invasion, they already did an invasion in 2014.
Right.
The difference now is that the United States government is trying to alert and educate publics here in the United States and around the world to the types of activities that the Russians are doing to what they call prepare the battlefield for the invasion. And a lot of this involves false flag operations, deception operations designed to make it look like a provocation. The Russians did this in Chechnya way back in 1999. The Russian intelligence reportedly blew up an apartment building and blamed it on Chechen terrorists, and then the next thing you know, the Russians invaded Chechnya. We're starting to see a little bit of that on the ground in eastern Ukraine, where there have been exchanges and even a car bombing. So, like I said, the situation on the ground looks like they're getting ready for some type of invasion.
Yeah, according to NBC News, 1,500 explosions, 2 dead so far, 11 wounded. What should our role be? Providing support or providing troops, or a little bit of both?
Well, I think we learned in the last century that if you appease aggression, it doesn't end well. And so there does seem to be a kind of an appeasement-oriented approach to it. I think that deterrence, peace through strength works. If you look at what the Trump administration did in taking out Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps of Iran, they blew up his motorcade in Baghdad. That's the kind of thing that sends a message to these dictators. And it's not just Russia. We have to worry about the Chinese making moves against Taiwan. They've been stepping up military pressure with provocative military flights going into the southern air defense zone of Taiwan. Just recently, a Chinese helicopter flew over one of the islands that is closer to the Chinese coast. So I think Xi Jinping, the Chinese dictator, is going to be watching very closely how the U.S. responds to any kind of a Russian incursion into Ukraine.
What if it's just the continued underwriting of the Russian separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk, these eastern portions of Ukraine where there's Russian insurgency, if you will? I mean, if those essentially come under the formal control of Putin, does that draw any sort of response from us? Should it?
Well, I think the sanctions are going to be crippling if they do in fact invade, and if the Biden administration goes through with the sanctions, and most importantly, if the European allies support those sanctions, it'll have pretty significant strategic consequence. First of all, it could collapse the Russian economy if they cut off natural gas flows from Russia to Europe. Now, the Europeans are going to be reluctant to do that, but there's other ways they can find U.S. Natural gas and other sources of energy to keep their houses warm over the winter. But I think that's critical. The other thing that could happen is that the sanctions could force Putin to become an even closer ally to China. The Chinese have been playing a very cautious game. Their official foreign policy is they're against foreign nations interfering in the affairs of other nations. But here they've almost publicly come out in support of Russia's efforts to try and retake Ukraine a la the Soviet Union.
What do you think Putin's endgame is? What does he want?
I think he's faced with some domestic problems at home, and this is a way to counter that by fueling Russian nationalism in support of his goal of trying to reestablish portions of the old Soviet Union. And he's claiming that these are vital national security interests to Russia to retake what they call the near abroad. And Ukraine is the prize in that strategy. They want it's a large country. It has a lot of industry. It has a breadbasket as well. So they really want to take over Ukraine as a first step. And of course, other Eastern European nations like Poland are extremely concerned about this, seeing that they could be next on the invasion list.
How realistic, how plausible is that Putin would have the wherewithal to move past Ukraine, even if he was assuming he was able to take the whole country, which is a huge assumption, and not just the Donbass region, How realistic is that threat to go to Poland, to go to the Baltics next?
Well, I think from a strategic point of view, they might not need to do that. If they get control of Ukraine militarily, they may then try to use what they call gray warfare, gray zone warfare, that is below the level of armed conflict, information operations, intelligence operations, to try and destabilize and ultimately overthrow these NATO governments. I think those are the fears that NATO has. I reported in my Washington Times column last week that the Poles had asked the U.S. government to send 1,000 Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine, and the idea being that, okay, if they invade, they'll have these portable weapons that could be used in some type of resistance force there. So that's how concerned the Poles are. The Pentagon was delaying the request because they didn't want to send them from the stockpiles that we currently have.
Moving back home, but related to Afghanistan, a Department of Defense Inspector General's report finds that at least 50 individuals brought to this country as Afghan refugees pose, quote, potentially significant security concerns, unquote, were they to make it inside America's borders. And they have, because to make the Defense Department report, again, 28 of 31 evacuees with known derogatory information can no longer be located. So there's a belief that the people identified as posing security concerns have been brought over and have made it into this country, and have at least a number of them, almost more than 24 of them, have now disappeared.
Well, that's clearly a counterterrorism concern. I mean, for the FBI, they have to be able to try and find and locate those people. And I think in the bigger picture, the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was really a surrender, really, I think, is behind what is taking place now in the Ukraine crisis. I mean, I think Putin did a calculation that this was a weakness, showing weakness, and the saying is weakness is provocative. It provokes dictators like Putin into doing things. And so if you were to trace the origins of the current Ukraine crisis, it would go directly to that chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan.
He is Bill Gertz, Washington Times national security correspondent, author of Deceiving the Sky, Inside Communist China's Drive for Global Supremacy. Bill, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
My grandma makes fried chicken that is simply the world's best. But sometimes she'll say, I didn't get that batch just perfect.